So welcome back. So in this next step, we need to connect our EC2 instance and then run and then deploy to the EC2 instance. So how do we do that? Now we are successfully written the first job that's going to build and push to Docker Hub, and the next one is now going to deploy to the EC2 instance. So runs on Ubuntu. It needs the upper job, and let's specify our steps. So it's now going to be steps. Now in this step, we are not connecting, we are not cloning a repository. We are just simply connecting to our EC2 instance. And the first step is, now in order for you to connect to an EC2 instance, you need the private key, right? You need the private key to be set up for you to be able to do that. Now, how do we do that? Now, let's look for an SSH agent workflow that will help us to save our SSH keys, in order for us to connect. Now, remember that if you want to connect, let me explain what I mean. If you want to connect, let me create a new terminal. If you want to connect, you need something like this, says SSH-I, followed by the key name. Let me call it test.pem. Then followed by the username. And the IP address, right? So in the same vein, we also need that here. But this time, we're not going to be writing the logic by ourselves. Rather, we're going to be using a workflow, an already made workflow. Now, the already made workflow we're going to use is, now let's start with the name of this workflow. Sorry, I think this code suggestion is messing things up. So let's call this, the first step, let's call it name. And it's going to be setup SSH. Now, the one we're going to be using is this. Now, let me explain. Now, this web factory SSH agent, we can look it up on the GitHub action. So if we come here like this and head over to our actions, here, let's search for it in the marketplace web factory. You can see it here, web factory SSH agent. Now, essentially, what this helps you to do is it helps you to store your private key, run your normal SSH. Now, remember that if you want to log in, you need SSH to be able to log in, and this is going to set that up for you. So, in the next step of your job, you don't need to now specify this. All you need to do is just to run your SSH command without any problems. So let's go back to there. Let's go back, and we have our SSH, and here we need to specify the variable of our private key. Now remember that we actually did set that up. Let's go back to our browser. Let's go back to the settings and our keys, actions, and what is the name? The name of our SSH key, we call it SSH private key. So that's what we need. I'm going to leave it as it is, exactly as it is on the variable. So let's change that here. Yeah, right. Yeah, SSH private key. So we have that now. Let's remove that. So this is the SSH private key. So this is now going to add our SSH key to the SSH agent running on the server, which will now enable us to log in. So in this next step, we need to copy our Docker Compose YAML. We need to copy our Docker Compose YAML. We need to copy it. So let's do copy Docker Compose YAML. Now, how do we copy? Now, if you want to copy a file from using a Linux using Linux command, you use the scp command followed by the name of the file, which is this, and then followed by the name of the user. So in this case, let's reference it just like we did here. So what is the username of the server? Now the username of the server is, let's go back to what did we use? So we use EC2 host and EC2 user, the host and user. So those are the two variables that we use. So these are the two variables, EC2 host and EC2 user. So let's go back. And so this is now going to be EC2 user. And the next one is going to be EC2 host. So these are the two variables that we need. Remember this command here, Ubuntu at IP. So that's the same thing here. Secret.ec2 instance is going to grab the name of the EC2 user, and the secret.ec2 host is going to grab the public IP, which is the Ubuntu at, Now this, what does this mean? What does this strict host key checking means? It means that if you try to log in by default, it's going to ask you a question that, do you trust this key and all of that. Now, being that we are logging in pragmatically or programmatically, if we don't specify this pipeline is going to fail because there's nobody there to say yes or no. So because of that, we are specifying this automatically to override whatever is going to throw us. So it means that it's going to run without any failure. Now this is now going to copy the Docker Compose file, which is this Docker Compose file here, which is now going to deploy our application to that server. But before we do that, let's see something. Now, by default, this Docker Compose is actually building, the Docker image locally, and then it's going to build it locally, and then it's not going to run it. But we already have the image, right? So let's change this build instead to image, just like we have here, image here, right? So we now have image here instead of the build, because we don't want to build it locally. We've already built and pushed to Docker Hub. We just need to specify the image. So all these three are no longer needed. So let's get rid of them and let's specify image. So the image is not going to be the Docker username, blah blah blah, like this. Now it's not going to be the Docker username, which is the one specified on our GitHub Actions secrets /vote, which is for the voting service and the latest. So this is what we're going to be using instead of the build. So we're going to get rid of this as well. So let's remove this. Let's call this image and that. So Docker username result latest. So that's the same thing as that. And the last one, which is the worker. Is the worker. So let's get rid of that. Image, and that. So we now have all of them parameterized. So we now have the image, result, and image, result. So we now have the three of them. Can I save it? Let's save our file. Yeah, let's go back to here and let's save this. Now, before we do anything else, let's run this pipeline to see if it's going to work before writing the final stage, which is now going to run Docker Compose up, which is now going to spin up our application. So let's push. I'm going to build and push, commit and push. Let's call this log add a step to connect to EC2. Now let's go. Most likely we're going to have issues, but let's see. So come here, create a new tab. Let's see. It's running. Wow. Okay, cool. So as you can see, we now have two jobs, which is build and push, and the second one is deploy to EC2 instance. And notice very well how this connect. It means that this is going to run to completion before this. So this is dependent on this, just from what we said, specify here. Remember, we specify deploy to EC2 instance needs build.push, which means that it's going to need this specific job for it to work, right? So cool. Now let's go back to here and see. Let's wait for some seconds to let's refresh. We can go in if we want. Now it's not going to build. It's not going to build. It's still running. So let's wait for some seconds. So for some reasons, our pipeline is failing. Let's go back. Why is it failing? Let's refresh. So why is it failing? As you can see, these two steps passed. So we were able to add SSH key to the SSH agent, and trying to copy this is where it fails. Now it's throwing us an error that run SCP command didn't work. Local docker compose YAML, no source file or directory. Now let's go back and investigate the issue. Now remember that by default, each job by default runs on a separate environment, which means that this environment here is different from this one. This is running on one virtual machine, a new one, which gets destroyed after this job, and this is running on a new one. So because of that, we don't have access to this particular code. Remember that this shortcut here is what is going to clone this repository into this Ubuntu server, so that we can have a copy locally and then run our commands against it. So the pipeline failed because there was no shortcut service here. So when we're trying to copy this initially, it means that this file is no longer present in this file is not present in this new virtual machine, in this new server. So first of all, we need to add that as our first step. So let's paste that here. So yeah, so let's do that first. First thing first, let's check out our code. Yeah, and then I think this is not going to work. So let's save that and push. Commit and push. Let's see added checkout. Added checkout. Let's go back and wait for some seconds again. So let's wait. This is going to save some time, so I'm going to pause the video and wait till we have a successful pipeline. So our pipeline ran successfully, and if you click here and go to the logs, the one we are particular about, we are concerned about is this one. So permanently added to the list of known hosts, and yeah, it worked. It copies our file. Now let's go back to our EC2 instance. Let's log in and see if that actually worked. Now let's go back here, and first of all, let me change directory into my downloads. No source file downloads. No source file downloads. Okay, I think I'm in the wrong. Why is that? Okay, you know what? Let me clear my screen. Sorry, it's kind of messy. So let's cd into the directory and then let's run this. Okay, we need the IP address. Let's grab the IP address. So this is the IP address. Grab the IP address. Go back and paste it here. Paste the IP address. Hit enter. Still having issues. Why is that? I'm going to make my screen a little bit bigger. So download, cd download, followed by the Ubuntu user, followed by the IP address. So why is that not working? Downloads, no such file. Okay, let me see what we have here. Okay, so I think it's going to work now. So let's see. Yeah. So we've logged into our server. Let's run ls. As you can see, the file was copied successfully. And if you check the content of this file, you're going to see it is exactly the same as our Docker Compose file. So that is successful. Great. Now, let's add the last stage, which is now going to run Docker Compose to deploy the application. I'm so excited about this. So let's see. The next step will now be deploy run docker compose. Let's just say run docker compose up. Now, running docker compose up is still the same. We're going to run docker compose up. Now, first of all, in order for you to run docker compose, you need to log in, which is the SSH. This part means we just want to log in, and the other part means that we are going to change directory. Now, this part, we're not going to change directory into the Ubuntu user, and from there, we're now going to run docker compose pool to pull all the images that we specified inside the docker compose file, which is docker compose pool, and we're now going to run docker compose up -d. Now, this is how we are going to do it. Now, I need you to understand something, that these commands are not magic. This SCP command, if you are very good in Linux, that's why I tell people that Linux is the basics of Linux is the fundamental skill for any DevOps engineer. So this is all a Linux class. So I will not be explaining those commands for you. I just need you to understand how to use them in the CI/CD pipeline. So that's it to deploy to how to deploy with that. And now, so we'll now have that, and let's save this and push. Let's push and save. Now, I'm sure that we're going to run into some issues, particularly about here. The issue we're going to be facing, I think, is this. When you come to Docker Compose, this Docker username. I don't know if I just want us to experiment. Let's see if Docker Compose is intelligent enough to pull this Docker up username from the GitHub Actions secret. I'm not sure that's going to work, but I think it's going to run into issues. If it doesn't work, we just change this to the name, and then let's just change this to the name so that we have Docker Hub username. So that's it. Let's go back and see our pipeline in action. Let's go back to the pipeline and go to action. Let's see. Let's wait for a few seconds and see if everything is in order. So the first stage is completed, but this is where we now have issue. So where we had issues is here, Docker Compose up. We're having issues here. Let's see what the logs is telling us. It's telling us that Docker Compose command not found. Oh, I expect that. I should have known. Now, if we go back to the command here, if we try to run that command inside the server like this, let's clear your screen, let's say Docker Compose, find out that this Docker Compose command is not found. And the reason is because the new version of Docker Compose uses something like this. That is what is going to work. So let's change that here. Let's change here to the command to Docker separated, remove the hyphen, and then remove the hyphen. So that's it. And also, I want us to change this because I know it's going to cause issue. Here, let's change this to the username. This is the username of the Docker Hub. We can use that as an environmental variable, but I don't want this lesson to be too complicated, so I'm going to remove that and use the username directly instead. Yeah, so that's it. Let's save and run again. I hate writing commit messages. So let's go back. Let's go back to the actions and go to actions and see if everything is going to work. So I'm going to wait for a while and see what happens next. So let's see what's going on here. Let's click on it. It's still running. And yeah, we can see the Docker Compose file is being executed on the server. It's pulling those images, pulling them, being that it's the first time. And as you can see, everything is now up and running, which looks really, really good, right? Cool. So let's see. So Docker Compose is still running. It's still running. I think we have issues. So DB1 is unhealthy. Why is it unhealthy? Okay, let's go into the server and troubleshoot what the problem is.